As our honeymoon destination, Nicole and I chose the East Coast of the United States. We embarked on our East Coast tour, exploring New England, and its surroundings, originally from Huntington and Cambridge, near the esteemed Cambridge University. We were particularly excited to visit Yale and Harvard. It was like a dream come true for us, small-town people, to be in such prestigious academic settings. The biggest surprise was discovering how incredible and rural New York State was completely different from what we had imagined for over 3 weeks. Nicole and I ended up staying in more motels than the average American does in a lifetime, bumping into each other at every opportunity. We enjoyed every moment, promising each other on the plane home that we would soon be off on another adventure. It was a great plan, but as usual, life and work got in the way. Mixed, 9 years later, here we are. Nicole and Mike Martin in our 30s, happily married with no children, but with a hefty mortgage on our lovely home, just like most people in our situation at the time. Despite this, we were living life to the full. I had just been promoted to assistant manager at All Skins Limited, a company specializing in state-of-the-art incineration plants, where we were leading the industry in our niche. Although it was a small company, it was growing, and I had progressed with it under the leadership of my boss, George, who practically ran the company. I was probably 4th or 5th in the hierarchy. Nicole had also had a successful career working as a teacher, but her progression was more dependent on seniority than skills, which left her frustrated at times that I had progressed more quickly. I later wondered if this jealousy had anything to do with these actions. Despite the obstacles, I can say with certainty that we were still deeply in love. Maybe not with the same fiery passion as when we were first married, but that's normal. Our love life was okay with occasional lulls, when we were busy, balanced by periods of intense activity, when we felt like it. Our story began in the middle of one of these lulls, but we were looking forward to a well-deserved period of intimacy. We hadn't taken a holiday for almost a year, but with Nicole's school holidays starting the week before, we were getting ready for a well-deserved trip to the beaches of Spain the next day. Nicole convinced me to go shopping for new holiday clothes, but as usual, I ended up with just one pair of shorts. Predictably, Nicole left the store with 4 or 5 new outfits, each showing more skin than the last. It was the last outfit she chose that really caught my attention. Nicole was always more daring and adventurous on holiday, doing things she wouldn't normally do at home that day. She seemed to fully embrace the holiday mood, and the blouse she chose definitely reflected that. She asked me, presenting it to me for my opinion. "It's a bit transparent," I commented without really disapproving. "So it's perfect," she replied with a smile. "I should probably try it on," she added, disappearing into the fitting room with the sheer black satin blouse, leaving me surrounded by other men waiting for their partners. I wondered if she was going to come out and wear it in front of me like some women do, or if she would decide for herself. I had a feeling that she was wearing a pretty revealing bra that day. So if she did come out, it would be a bit of a spectacle for the men waiting around, and of course she walked straight out into the open area without looking around the corners. I was wrong about one thing, though. The bra. It was probably the one she was wearing instead. But since she had taken it off to try on the blouse, it didn't really matter. The male gazes, including mine, widened in surprise as the collar turned to show off the new blouse. Well, supposedly to me, it was black, delicate, and other than that, what could I say? It covered her up a bit. It did the job, I guess. But I couldn't really say it was preserving her modesty. What was the term I was looking for? Showing off her assets. Definitely not. Her upper body was barely concealed. Barely preserving her modesty. We could clearly make out the shape of her breasts. No doubt my wife Nicole was showing off her assets for all the hommes present, as if she were completely naked. The thin fabric of the blouse hid almost nothing. Every detail clearly visible. It would have been less surprising if she had been completely naked, and she seemed to enjoy it. I couldn't say I was upset, but she was certainly enjoying the attention. The naughty Nicole decided to buy the blouse, and we continued to the next store. That's where she found the new bikini, or what you could call a bikini. She disappeared into the fitting room and took her time. Finally, she pulled back the curtain and stood there for me to admire. My heart was racing looking at her, but I could see a few other guys waiting too. Take a look. Nicole, you see, is quite beautiful, about 1.60, quite slim. Where is the top? Did I manage to ask when I found my voice? "We're going to Spain," said Nicole excitedly. Who needs a bikini top there? It was true. The year before. After only a few hours, she had abandoned her top and joined the many other women walking around naked on the beach. She had not cared for it the whole time we were there. But a department store when bridge was not comparable to a beach in Spain. Do you like it? Then, she asked me, arching her back slightly, emphasizing how beautiful her body part was. I love it, as the few curious ones chimed in before I could even answer. Nicole Harriet attention, twisting to offer a different view. Can I take it? Then she asked me as I stood there unsure whether to be embarrassed or turned on by the whole spectacle. I will take it, joking a mess, and the others laughed. Okay, you can take it, and I said, giving in to her urge. I got it warned before things got out of hand when we got home. I started thinking Nicole wasn't usually like this. So, something was definitely wrong. My wife Nicole was one of those determined women. And when she felt offended, she always wanted to get even for months before, that she had been flirting with a co-worker right in front of me. It all culminated in her kissing me on the dance floor while I had to stand there and watch. I wasn't even sure where her hands were. Come to think of it. Then, we had a huge fight about how she had humiliated me in front of everyone, but all she had to say was, it was my fault, apparently. I had forgotten our anniversary of our first date a few days before, and she decided to teach me a lesson. When was the last time we even celebrated it? Geez. Then about a month later, I came home late when we were supposed to go out to dinner. It was only half an hour stuck in traffic on the way home from a client meeting up north of the Hure on the road. Plus an accident on the motorway earlier in the day had delayed me. I had even called to say I was going to be late, but it didn't seem to matter when I got home. She had already left and left a note saying she had canceled our dinner reservation. I had no idea where she had gone, just that she was expecting me to pick her up later. A little over 3 hours had passed, and it wasn't an invitation to join her, but more of a request for me to pick her up. I told her what I thought and told her she could make her own way home if she had gone out on her own. She could go home by herself. Lots of guys here would be happy to give me a ride home, Mike. I just don't know how I could repay their kindness. That's what she said exactly. When I got to the club, I was furious and found Nicole surrounded by a group of young guys, most of them 5 years younger, which she didn't help things. They were clearly hoping for something special to happen that night. The skimpy dress she was wearing did nothing to convince them they had made the right choice, or to calm me down as I approached the group. At least 3 of them had their hands on her around her waist on her exposed shoulder, and one of them was dangerously close to her. "Excuse me, guys," I said as I carefully made my way over to her, gently pushing their hands away from her. "It's time for this lady to go home." "Get lost, man," one of them replied as he tried to push me away. "We saw her first. Go get your own daughter." "It's okay, guys." Stepped in. "Nicole, my husband is here to take me home. Sorry to break the mood, but I have to go with him." He wasn't content. It was clear he thought Nicole had lured them in, and now I was here to ruin their fun. 2 of them, including the most aggressive one, started pushing me. It had been years since I had been in a fight, not since my school days, but I'm not one to back down easily. So I fought back. Things were getting tense until Nicole stepped in again and "Stop it, guys. L's big ones, leave him alone." "Okay?" Those words calmed them down a bit, but the atmosphere was still tense. "Come on, guys. Keep going, Nicole." Like she was enjoying the drama. "I'll give you all a kiss. Goodbye. Then me and my husband are leaving." That may have calmed them down a bit, but it just made me furious. "You kiss one of them." "Nicole!" I yelled at him, "and don't bother going home. House tonight." A standoff ensued. People around us started to move away, and the bartender started to clear the glasses. Most of the young guys seemed ready to, but the 2 troublemakers were just as agitated as I was. Trouble was looming, and I found myself right in the middle of it. Suddenly, 2 big bouncers appeared and started to separate us. I can't say I wasn't relieved, even though I was all excited and ready to fight. "You guys, stay put," one of the bouncers said to a group of young men pushing them away. Then he turned to me. "I suggest you get the hell out of here, buddy, while you're still in one piece," he said, pointing at Nicole. "Take that troublemaker with you. There are times when you stand up for your wife when she's being insulted, and times when it's better to leave." I chose the latter and dragged Nicole along with me. I also tend to agree with him at that point. The ride home was quiet. But once we got home, we had another big fight. We barely spoke to each other for the next few days, and I warned her that if she did something like that again, there would be serious consequences. Now let's talk about what happened in the locker room and why it was just a warning. She said to me, "I'm not happy that you're working tomorrow morning when we're supposed to be leaving. It was just to warn you." Well, in my opinion, there's a big difference between showing your boobs to strangers and teasing them, like she did before the next day. I only had one appointment with BCH. He was one of those super genuine guys coming from America to review our products. My boss George had visited them a few weeks ago, and BCH was there to see how we did things. My job was to quickly explain our manufacturing process to him, and then take him to see one of our factories in action. I had planned to have a quick lunch with him, and then go home to change and drive to Etsteed Airport for our late afternoon flight. Nicole was really angry when I told her about my meeting with BCH. She demanded that I cancel and find someone else to replace me. I tried to explain to her how crucial the meeting was to our business, and how it could open up great opportunities in the US market for us and me personally. But she wouldn't listen. And that's probably why she acted like she did the day before. "You care more about your stupid job than me," she yelled when I refused to cancel. I didn't think it was useful to mention all the times we had to change our plans because of her school commitments. I knew that everything would be fine once we got to the plane. I knew Nicole could be a bit self-centered and stubborn sometimes, but I knew that when I married her, so I couldn't really complain. I gave her a little pat on the bum as I left. I kissed her on the cheek and reminded her to be ready and packed when I get home in a few hours. "You better not be a minute late or you'll regret it," she said to me with more venom than I thought was necessary. Meeting went really well, in fact better than I expected. I hit it off with BCH even though we had only met briefly before he asked some tough questions. But I handled them well, and by the end of the morning, it looked like we would get the order we wanted around 11:30. BCH asked where we were going for lunch. I suggested somewhere local, but he had another idea. "Let's go to Mario's. He said we can talk more there." I checked the time since I had some time to waste, and I agreed. An hour later, we were only half eaten, and he was bombarding me with questions that caught me off guard. How did he want to know about our company, our product, and even about myself? I decided to call my wife quickly, to tell her that I might be late. I explained to him apologetically to go to the bathroom, not wanting him to hear my frustration. I figured I would wait another 10 minutes before reluctantly interrupting him and explaining why I had to leave. Why Nicole yelled on the phone when I told her, refusing to listen to my attempts to reassure her that we still had time. "I warned you, Mike. If you were late, you would regret it. I will not miss this holiday even if I have to go alone." I tried to calm her down, but to no avail. When I hung up, we were both upset and she was no longer listening to me. I decided to go back to BCH and explain my situation, asking if he could go back to our factory alone. That would make me save time, and I would only be a few minutes later than expected when I got home. BCH greeted me when I got back to the table. "Well, Mike, it's time I told you the truth," he said. I felt an uneasy feeling in my stomach. What was it? How did he know I was in a hurry? I sat down, bracing myself for any news, fearing he would cancel the big order I thought I had secured. How did he know I was in such a hurry? I made a mistake trying to rush things. Why didn't I just tell him up front that I had a tight schedule? "I want you to work for me, Mike," he said confidently. "How about moving to the US?" My jaw dropped when I heard that. "Can you repeat that?" I asked once I had recovered all these questions. "Mike," I observed, "continue to booch. George didn't mention it, but we plan to manufacture your plants in the US, and we need your expertise to set it up, but be messed up." But BCH continued. "George recommended you as the best choice. He doesn't want to lose you, but this deal could change everything, and he thinks you're the man for the job." "George knows?" I asked. Surprised, of course, Mike, but I wanted to meet you first. To be sure, I collapsed in my chair, overwhelmed with excitement to work as an executive in the US. Nicole would be overjoyed when I told her, but I never imagined it would turn out this way. I listened shocked as he detailed the incredible offer. An incredible salary, stock options, a company BMW, even an apartment until we find ours. "You have a plane to catch," he said, concluding. "You can tell me your decision after your vacation, once you will have discussed it with your wife. I will give it to you." Now I blurted out, "I agree." and I am sure my wife does too. We both stood up, shook hands, and BCH sent me to get my wife and catch my flight. I left, feeling ecstatic, but I also checked the time to make sure I still had a chance. It would be fair. But as I headed to the parking lot, I called home. It rang, but no one answered. Checking the time, I realized I was 2 minutes late than I said at that moment. I reached my car and dialed Nicole's cell phone. She answered right away. "Where are you?" she yelled on the way home. "Honey," and I said, excited to share the news. "You are an idiot, Mike." She cut in. "You care more about your job than me." She told me she had to call Terry to take her to the airport because she knew I wouldn't be on time. Terry, yes. Terry Jones, her colleague art teacher. I didn't like her too much, especially since she kissed him during our last fight. "Nicole," I pleaded, "I'm almost home, just a few minutes late, too late." "Mike," she replied, "I'm halfway to the airport. If you're not here, I'm leaving without you." She hung up, and despite my attempts to call back, there was no answer. I looked at the time and thought how ridiculous this situation was. I still had plenty of time to get to the airport and check in. So I turned around and headed to Stansted, arriving there just as I expected, at least half an hour early. I parked. I grabbed my parking ticket and headed to the departure terminal, hoping that Nicole had at least taken my suitcase with her. I looked around. I searched, but I couldn't find it, and time was running out. Finally, I approached the departure counter and asked if my wife had checked in yet. "Oh yes," the pretty blonde at the desk said. "After checking her list, she checked in about 15 minutes ago as Mrs. Martin, and there is also a Mr. Jones." What my initial reaction scared the poor girl, and I had to apologize for my outburst. There must be a mistake. I insisted, "Mrs. Martin?" "Yes, but not Mr. Jones." The clerk saw I was very upset and double-checked everything for me. "No, it is correct." She finally confirmed the tickets were booked in Mr. and Mrs. Martin's name, but Mrs. Martin changed one to Mr. Jones. "Can she do that?" I whispered, unable to believe what I had heard. "Yes," the clerk replied, starting to sympathize with me, realizing something unusual was happening. She paid the £40 fee for the change, and I stood there feeling lost like a refugee, not knowing what to say or do. The clerk explained Mr. Martin had his passport, which seemed to make everything legitimate. I thanked him, and I walked away from the counter feeling deeply miserable. What was going on? What had she planned? This was way beyond a joke. I took a look at the departure board. I realized the plane hadn't left yet, and it hadn't even started boarding. I hurried to get to the gate, but I couldn't get through without a boarding pass. No ticket. No entry. It was clear I tried to argue beg, but when security was threatened, I gave up. I went to the bar and sat there feeling defeated. I couldn't believe it. My whole world had been turned upside down in just half an hour. Nicole couldn't do this. There was no way she was going to Spain with that guy. Terry Jones instead of me. It couldn't be true. I was hoping someone would tell me it was just a bad dream. Then an idea came to me. Not the best idea, but it seemed like it. At the time, I rushed to the observation lounge on the other side of the airport, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was happening. It used to be an open terrace, but now with security measures, we had to watch the planes through large windows. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. There was my wife, Nicole, walking across the tarmac towards the waiting Boeing 737. She was hard to miss with her long blonde hair and slender figure. That's when that idiot John got off the courtesy bus behind her and followed her to the plane when he caught up with her. I lost my temper. Even from a distance, I could see him putting his arm around her waist, and she was kissing him on the cheek. I know I shouldn't have banged on the window and screamed, but I couldn't stop me. The security guards had to do their job, so they held me back. They eventually released me when they realized I wasn't a threat. I walked back to my car feeling defeated. Trying to call Nicole on her phone was useless. What a joy. What a disaster. I think I cried that night, but I was so drunk on the way home from the pub, I'm not sure I couldn't call her in Spain. As I didn't have her number and her mobile phone didn't work abroad the next day around midday, I suddenly woke up to the sound of the phone ringing next to me. I found myself asleep on the sofa, holding the phone tightly. I don't know why I picked it up, confused and unsure who it could be. Was it John? I heard my wife Claire's voice, and bossy like the school teacher she is. "Yes. Did," I just answered. "Then you're not going to apologize?" "You idiot," accused me Nicole. She asked if I didn't feel bad for disappointing her again. I was caught off guard, asking if she really thought I had let her down. But she continued to accuse me of prioritizing my work over her feelings. I vainly brought up the time she had missed dinner with our new neighbors because of a problem at school. "That's different, Mike. And you know it," she yelled from my point of view. It wasn't different at all. Realizing our argument was getting us nowhere, I tried to change the direction of our conversation. I had just woken up, and I was still sleepy, barely remembering the events of the night before, but I tried to talk to Nicole about Nicole's job offer, and I said more calmly, "I have to tell you something about my job. I got an offer here that you start all over again, Nicole. Your work. Your damn work. That's all that matters to you and me, then alone here in Spain." That's when I remembered everything, and I felt my love for Nicole begin to fade alone. "Nicole?" I asked. "And Terry Jones." Then she remained silent, shocked that I knew he was there with her, and she finally told him more softly, "Ent, are you still in bed with him? Anginist." After a pause, she said with, "And if so, you brought this on yourself. You moron, did he do his job well?" I asked, trying to hurt her better than you. Mike replied. Nicole meanly, "So take responsibility." Then she hung up, probably slamming the phone. If my marriage wasn't already over, this exchange could have been the last straw the next morning. Not too soon, I was in George's office discussing the new position. He seemed surprised that I wasn't in Spain, but I avoided giving him a direct answer. "Why didn't you tell him?" I asked. He replied that he couldn't do it until he met me in person and determined if I was the right choice. I thanked him sarcastically, noting that it could have cost my marriage. I told him about my problems, but he didn't seem particularly shocked. He pointed out that husbands are often the last to know when I asked him what he meant. He vaguely mentioned that at recent company events, my wife Nicole had been very outgoing, to say the least. I asked for clarification, but he simply shrugged. Leaving me to draw my own conclusions, I couldn't help but wonder who this woman I had loved and married for so many years really was. George tried to lighten the mood by mentioning Sal line, but I was too preoccupied with my own problems to show much interest. "Who is Lie?" I asked absent-mindedly. "Clever. That's what every man dreams of," he said, confused. I asked him for an explanation. He told me she was his new personal assistant. He had met in Asia. I just looked lost in thought. He called himself lucky and insisted that I would understand once I met him. Every gain seems to be accompanied by a loss. The next few days were confusing, partly because of the problems in my marriage, and also because of the speed with which my job transfer was going. My future employer and the licensing authorities were eager to finalize everything, making me feel overwhelmed. Nicole called again, as I expected, towards the end of the morning. She expressed her love and talked about how well her time was going. I tried to share some news with Nicole, but she cut me off, demanding an apology for my supposed attitude. I tried to ignore her provocations and tell her my news, but she cut me off again, claiming that she still loved me but was waiting for an apology. In the meantime, she mentioned that she had someone else to satisfy. I ended up hanging up, unsure if she was the one who hung up first. Nicole seemed to have been drinking, not completely drunk, but enough that a meaningful conversation would be impossible if she was prioritizing her affair with the art teacher over our potential future together. I concluded that it was her problem, not mine. The week turned out to be the most extraordinary week of my life, filled with both incredible excitement and profound sadness. What would be the outcome? The next call from Nicole caught me off guard. Arriving early in the morning, she seemed confused and asked Mike, "How did you know Terry was with me?" I explained that I had seen them board the plane together, trying to clear my mind. Foggy, surprised by her call at such an unusual hour, I confirmed my presence at the airport, my frustration growing. I asked, how else could I have known Terry was with her? Nicole wondered why I hadn't intervened. I raised my voice, explaining that by the time I got there, they had already checked in and security wouldn't let me through without a ticket, which led to my arrest. Nicole claimed she thought I wasn't coming and that Terry had just given her a lift to the airport, impulsively deciding to go with her. I sarcastically noted the convenience of Terry's availability to travel. I hung up on her before she could say more. She tried calling me several more times, but I was either too preoccupied with my plans, or I chose not to answer. A few days later, I finally picked up. "Hey, is it you?" Mike asked Nicole. "Yes, it's me." AJE answered, asking what she wanted you. "Mike, I want you," she said. "Terry turned out to be a real asshole and I need you," said Nicole. I answered something uncertain. She told me she had come back to her room the night before to find Terry with another woman, to which I replied curtly that it must have been terrible for her. She didn't caught the sarcasm and wondered out loud how anyone could do such a thing. I barely held back a laugh as I agreed that it was hard to believe she drunkenly lamented how Terry had betrayed her. And I offered a half-hearted expression of sympathy. Nicole announced that she was coming home early as she couldn't stay there any longer. She mentioned that her flight back to Israel was at 4 p.m. the next day, and asked if I could pick her up initially. Hesitant, I then realized that I could indeed meet her. I assured her that I would be there at 4. She then asked me if I had tried to tell her anything about my job on our last call. I played it down, saying that it was nothing she needed to worry about, knowing that she would find out for herself. Eventually, I was ready, and I was waiting at 2:30 p.m., slightly annoyed when her flight arrived 20 minutes late. Standing at the arrivals gate, I flashed my best smile as she walked by as soon as she saw me. She greeted me excitedly, dropped her suitcase, and gave me a passionate kiss. I have to admit, she looked amazing. Nicole's tan perfectly complemented her white hair. "Let's go home, honey," Nicole whispered, expressing how much I had missed her and her eagerness to make up intimately. It was like she had completely forgotten that she needed an apology from me and was ready to love me again. I suggested we have coffee or tea first. Despite her insistence on going straight home, I convinced her to make a stop at a nearby cafe for coffee for her and tea for me. I asked her how it went, her holiday. She admitted it had started well, but had quickly turned sour, when I jokingly asked her if Terry wasn't as satisfactory as she had hoped. She looked at me sadly, shed a tear, and revealed she had caught him with another person in his bed. I didn't mention that technically the bed and room were ours. As I had paid for the holiday, Nicole expressed disbelief at Terry's betrayal during their supposed holiday together. I offered my sympathy, understanding her feelings rejecting Terry. She insisted on going home to sort things out with me when I tried to share my news. She interrupted me, impatient to focus on us. Nicole cut me off, suggesting we talk on the way home, but I had already decided what I was going to do. I handed her the car keys, explaining that I came with her old car as my company car had been returned the day before. I also gave her the keys to the house, stating that they were now hers alone. I informed her that I had transferred everything into her name and settled all the bills for the month. I mentioned that she could get enough by selling the house for another short break in Spain, noting that the car needed some repairs with a tire, almost liss, and a gearbox problem. Nicole looked confused. Not fully understanding my words, I continued, revealing that I had accepted an incredible job opportunity in America with an exceptional salary and benefits, everything I had hoped for. Nicole's face lit up with a smile as she took in the news, which saddened me a little. She eagerly asked when we were moving. I informed her that my flight was leaving in 40 minutes. Her excitement was visible as she asked me if I had a ticket for her too. I said no. She then asked me when she would join me, and I had to tell her she wouldn't come with me. I apologized, but she didn't. 10 minutes later, I walked into the departure lounge alone, leaving Nicole behind in tears at the counter, where security wouldn't let her through. The last image I had of her was her face stewed with tears as she watched me leave her life strangely. It felt like a familiar situation that had been totally reversed just 10 days earlier. I had been the one stopped at the desk, unable to follow my loved one. It was a different airport and destination, but the pain was just as intense. Fast forward 9 years, 3 months, and 6 days. I found myself back at Israel in the same terminal I had left from years ago. It wasn't my first time back, but this time I had been in the UK for 2 weeks and was planning to stay much longer. My job with the boot company in Huntington in the USA had turned out to be a huge success. I would rise through the ranks to become CEO of this division and own a significant share of the business. BCH had become a close friend over the years in an interesting twist of fate. It was through him that George had offered me the opportunity to return to the UK and take up the role of managing director at All Skins. He was retiring, and the business had grown considerably since I left, largely due to our partnership in America, which had opened up a larger market for their products. This move was beneficial for everyone, especially me, as I was about to gain a significant share of the business. Also, I was standing in the arrivals section, waiting for a former colleague from BCH, who had been very supportive from the start, although he no longer worked there. It was exciting to have them join me in the UK. I didn't need to see her to know she had arrived. The reaction of almost every man in the crowd was straightening up as she noticed her spoke volumes. Milan was as dazzling as the first time I met her, if not more, and her smile lit up the whole terminal. Seeing me whispering to her two companions, she pointed at me, and they rushed towards me. "Daddy, Daddy, I missed you so much, Peter." Our 5-year-old daughter screamed excitedly, jumping into my arms. She looked so much like her mother, and had already saddened a few young boys when she moved to the UK with us. "Hi, Daddy," said my 8-year-old son, less energetically, but his smile showed his joy. He was big for his age, and I couldn't wait to see him adapt from American football to football here in Europe. Maybe he'll even play for Arsenal one day. "First day of the rest of our lives," said my wonderful wife, kissing me.